This report examines the multifaceted impact of these tariffs on aircraft transactions, maintenance operations, manufacturing and the broader air cargo sector, while analyzing strategic responses available to industry stakeholders navigating this new economic landscape. The recent wave of tariff policies implemented by the Trump administration in early 2025 represents a major shift in U.S. trade strategy that will have far-reaching consequences for the global commercial aviation sector. These new measures, which target imports from Canada, Mexico, and China, as well as worldwide steel and aluminum, are already transforming international trade dynamics, supply chains, and operational costs across the aviation industry. The United States has implemented a series of substantial tariff changes in the first quarter of 2025 that directly affect the aviation sector. On March 4, 2025, the US imposed 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican origin products, with Canadian energy products subject to a reduced 10% tariff. Simultaneously, tariffs on Chinese origin products were increased from 10% to 20%. While the US granted temporary relief on March 7, 2025, exempting Canadian and Mexican goods eligible for duty-free treatment under the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, until April 2, 2025, this represents only a short-term reprieve for affected industry players, according to a Holland and Knight report. Further complicating the trade environment, effective March 12, 2025, the US has imposed a worldwide 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports and certain derivative products. This policy affects raw materials critical to aircraft manufacturing and maintenance. The administration has also announced plans to implement reciprocal tariffs on countries imposing duties on US products, creating the potential for escalating trade tensions across multiple markets. The international response has been swift, with Canada and China already implementing counter-tariffs on certain US exports, and Mexico expected to follow suit had the US not paused tariffs for goods covered under USMCA. Geodis says these retaliatory measures create a complex set of trade barriers that aviation businesses must untangle. In particular, Canada's counter-tariffs include a 25% duty on $30 billion worth of US goods, while China has imposed 15% tariffs on key US farm products and implemented controls on businesses that can import into the country, according to a March 13, 2025 report. The new tariff regime significantly complicates aircraft purchases and sales involving US entities. Any aircraft of Canadian, Mexican, or Chinese origin being permanently imported into the US on or after March 4, 2025, as part of a sales transaction would be subject to the relevant country-wide tariff upon arrival at the first US port of entry. This applies regardless of the aircraft's current registry or the country from which it is being exported. Determining an aircraft's origin for tariff purposes depends on where it was substantially transformed rather than its registration or owner's citizenship. For example, a Canadian-manufactured aircraft that undergoes interior completion, paint, and other substantial modifications in Canada would be considered Canadian origin for tariff purposes, even if it bears a non-Canadian registration. This creates significant financial implications for transactions involving aircraft that have undergone substantial work in targeted countries. Conversely, US-manufactured aircraft imported from Canada or Mexico would not trigger additional tariffs, assuming they haven't been significantly modified abroad. Similarly, Canadian-manufactured aircraft that were substantially transformed in the US would avoid the additional duties, as per a Cirium report. These distinctions create complex decision points for aviation businesses regarding where to base aircraft maintenance and completion activities. The rapidly evolving nature of these tariff policies introduces substantial uncertainty into aircraft purchase agreements and long-term fleet planning. Aircraft transactions typically involve lengthy timelines, and the shifting tariff landscape means that deals negotiated before the new policies could face unexpected additional costs at closing. This unpredictability will likely drive changes in contract terms, with buyers and sellers needing to carefully allocate tariff risks and potentially incorporate contingencies for tariff increases. The impact of the new tariffs extends beyond whole aircraft, to encompass the complex global supply chain for aircraft parts and maintenance services. Canadian, Mexican and Chinese origin aircraft parts imported into the US will generally be subject to the new tariffs, significantly increasing costs for US-based maintenance operations. This represents a fundamental shift from previous practices, as many aviation-related items had benefited from zero tariffs under the 1979 Agreement on Trade in Civil Aircraft, of which the US, Canada and China are signatories. The situation regarding repairs and overhauls conducted in tariff-affected countries remains uncertain, with additional guidance needed from US Customs and Border Protection. Historically, when US commercial operators temporarily flew aircraft to foreign jurisdictions for repairs, no new formal entry or duties were required upon return. However, given that this duty-free treatment was based on the Civil Aircraft Agreement, it is unclear whether this exemption will continue under the new tariff regime. For defective components sent to Canada, Mexico or China for repair, the value of such maintenance would generally be subject to the 25% tariff upon re-importation into the US. This creates strong incentives for operators to redirect repair work to US facilities or countries unaffected by the tariffs, potentially disrupting established maintenance relationships and overloading domestic repair capacity. Bringing aircraft into the US for repair or overhaul will also face complications. Although such aircraft are typically imported under a temporary import bond or TIB and then re-exported without paying duties, the cost of these bonds may increase significantly under the new tariff structure, and underwriting will likely take more time than in the previous duty-free environment. These changes add administrative burden and financial pressure to maintenance operations that rely on the international movement of aircraft and components. The air cargo industry faces particularly significant challenges under the new tariff regime. When similar tariffs were introduced during President Trump's first term in 2018, air cargo demand growth slowed considerably, from 9% in 2017 to 3.5% in 2018, before declining by 3.9% in 2019. Due to their broader scope, the 2025 tariffs are anticipated to exert an even more substantial impact on the air cargo sector. One notable difference in the 2025 tariffs is their treatment of the de minimis provision, which applies to packages valued under $800. While this provision was previously exempted in 2018, its inclusion in the current tariff structure could significantly affect e-commerce shipments and small parcel delivery services that rely on air freight. Though President Trump has temporarily paused the repeal of this exception, the uncertainty surrounding its long-term status complicates planning for cargo carriers. The imposition of tariffs across multiple major trading partners simultaneously, including Canada, Mexico and China, magnifies the potential impact on international air cargo. These countries represent vital trade corridors for US businesses, and the combined effect of bilateral tariffs creates substantial headwinds for cargo volumes. The worldwide steel and aluminum tariffs also impact industries that traditionally rely on air freight for high-value, time-sensitive components. Cargo airlines must now navigate a complex landscape of shifting trade flows as manufacturers and retailers adjust their supply chains in response to tariff pressures. This will likely lead to changes in network planning, capacity deployment, and even aircraft acquisition strategies as carriers adapt to new trade patterns and volumes. The broader economic ramifications of the US tariff policies extend throughout the commercial aviation ecosystem. The tariffs are explicitly designed to promote and protect US manufacturing, which could accelerate the reshoring of aerospace production and assembly. This potential manufacturing shift presents opportunities and challenges. While it may stimulate domestic aerospace employment, it could also increase production costs and disrupt established supply chains optimized for global efficiency. Aircraft manufacturers face difficult decisions regarding sourcing strategies. The aerospace industry has developed highly specialized global supply chains, with components often crossing borders multiple times during production. The new tariff structure adds complexity and cost to these intricate manufacturing networks, potentially forcing redesigns of production systems that have been optimized over decades. The tariffs introduce new considerations for airlines and leasing companies concerning aircraft acquisition and fleet planning. The country of manufacture and substantial transformation now carries significant financial implications, which may influence decisions between otherwise similar aircraft options. This could alter the competitive landscape between manufacturers based in different regions, with potential long-term consequences on market share. The financial impact extends to consumers as well. Higher aircraft, parts and maintenance costs will inevitably lead to increased airline operational expenses, which may be passed on to passengers through higher fares. Similarly, the air cargo sector will likely adjust freight rates to accommodate the increased costs of cross-border trade, affecting shipping costs throughout the economy. Aviation businesses are developing various strategies to mitigate the impact of the new tariff policies. For companies involved in aircraft transactions, careful consultation with customs brokers and trade counsel before importing aircraft or parts has become essential. Contract terms are being revised to specifically address how tariff costs will be allocated between parties, with some agreements incorporating force majeure provisions triggered by tariff increases above certain thresholds. The timing of aircraft deliveries and imports has taken on new strategic importance. Since the physical entry of aircraft into the US for consumption triggers formal entry and duty requirements, some transactions are being structured to delay US entry or to take delivery outside the US. Companies with existing contractual obligations are exploring amendments to postpone deliveries or modify delivery locations to avoid immediate tariff impacts. Supply chain diversification has accelerated in response to the tariffs. Aviation businesses are reassessing their vendor networks and exploring alternatives in countries unaffected by the new duties. This includes potential shifts in parts sourcing, maintenance providers, and even aircraft selection based on the country of manufacture. Financial protection strategies, including customs bond coverage adjustments, are being implemented to prevent insufficiency notices and ensure compliance with the new requirements. Companies are also conducting comprehensive reviews of their harmonized tariff codes to identify potential cost-saving opportunities and provide accurate classification of imported goods. The US tariff policies implemented in early 2025 represent a fundamental realignment of trade relationships that will have lasting effects on global commercial aviation. The immediate impact includes increased costs for aircraft transactions, parts and maintenance services involving Canada, Mexico and China, with potential further implications as retaliatory measures take effect. The air cargo sector faces particular challenges, with historical evidence suggesting significant volume impacts are likely. Beyond these immediate effects, the tariffs are accelerating structural changes in aviation supply chains and manufacturing strategies. Companies throughout the aerospace ecosystem are reassessing their international footprint, supplier relationships, and contractual approaches to adapt to this new trade landscape. The fluid nature of these policies, with exemptions granted and modifications made on short notice, creates substantial uncertainty that further complicates long-term planning. As the industry adapts to these changes, the competitive dynamics between global aviation players may shift significantly. US-based manufacturers may benefit from increased domestic production, while international aerospace companies could face more significant barriers to the US market. Thank you everyone for watching. If you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. See you next time.